When I was 17, I worked in a video game arcade. It seemed like a dream job at the time, but it turned out to be a seedy underworld where I ended up risking my life. I want to share this story with you guys because not only was it pretty wild, but it offered some pretty big lessons for a naive kid. It was all fun and games. They gave me a master key where I could just play endless free games at the end of my shift. I ran parties, but it was a bit of a sensory overload. There was neon lights, bells, whistles, the sound of gunfire, racing cars. The counter was always overloaded with kids amped on sugar, people wanting change, and people trying to exchange these tickets they'd won for like slime and bouncy balls and lava lamps. So it was very high paced and kind of anxiety inducing, but at first I loved it. Until one afternoon, I was cleaning around a Daytona machine, which was a car racing game. And when I put the broom under the seat, it knocked into like a wooden handle. I reached my hand under the car racing seat and pulled out a giant machete. As I looked at my shocked reflection in the blade, I was like, I don't know what the heck this is doing here. I don't know if a crime's been committed and it's been dumped or whether it's been hidden for somebody to pick up. All I knew was that my alarm bells were ringing. I worked there full-time for a year and every day something crazy went down. Basically, I started to notice the patterns of all these shady dealings going on. It was actually the perfect place to drug deal because of all the noise and distraction. The dealers would come in, they would leave a package at a video game. Someone would come in, go to that game, take their package and leave. Bags kept getting snatched. There was no security. It was a multi-story building. And at 17, they promoted me to supervisor. I was chuffed as a 17-year-old. They saw the potential in me, but it was a multi-story building with a tiny office with a safe packed full of cash behind a dodgy timber door. And I was essentially risking my life for the minimum wage. There wasn't a lot the cops could do, so they weren't around much. The issue was when it started to get a little bit personal. And me being young and kind of gung-ho and naive, took it upon myself to clean up the arcade. And from that moment on, I was pretty much in over my head. At the same time, my moral boundaries started to get crossed a little bit because on my break, I went to get McDonald's across the road and the manager at Macca's made a deal with me that he would give me Happy Meals for free if I gave him free games. I justified it to myself as well. I'm kind of in danger here and I'm not making much money, so I'll take the free Macca's. In a way, I was doing a dodgy deal myself. Anyway, one day this drug dealer comes in and as he goes up the stairs, I watch him on the camera. I see him put a package under a machine. As he goes down, I go up and I take the package and I run into the office. I called the cops and when they came and valued the package, there was a couple of grand worth of heroin in there and the police were concerned for my safety. These bad hombres were still hanging around outside the arcade and I was worried that they'd either want their money back or revenge. Nothing happened, but when I locked up at night, I was always looking over my shoulder. Anyway, it all came to a head one Saturday night when the arcade was absolutely packed. My colleague was on his break. They had hired a security guard, but he'd finished his shift, so I was all on my own, and I was getting hit from every angle at the counter. And this little kid comes up to me and tells me that a man has been sick inside the roller coaster simulator. It was like a big yellow pod, and he'd been sick inside of it. When I opened it, the smell was unbearable and I didn't know what to do. So I closed the pod, wrapped it in crime scene tape. I had the genius idea to get 2 mops and stick them together to make one really long mop. So I've got this 5-meter mop and I'm trying to clean this thing from a distance and all the teenagers up on the balcony are laughing at me. At that moment, the bloke who was sick in the pod comes to the window and starts impersonating me cleaning with the mop. And at that point, I snapped. I dropped the mop. I ran out the store and chased this guy down the street. This is not something I'd normally do. And as I'm chasing him, he clipped a rack of sunglasses fell to the ground, and the cops pinned him to the floor. He'd obviously already been on their radar. They saw I was working, so they sent me back to the arcade. As I was walking back, I decided enough is enough. Things had gone too far already. So I walked into the arcade. The place is still pumping, walked straight up to the switchboard, and in one motion, pulled the switch and shut down the power to the entire arcade. The silence was deafening, and as people looked up from the machines, it was literally like they'd been unplugged. I kicked everyone out, I shut the roller door, and never went back. This was the first time as a 17-year-old kid that I truly stood up for myself. I justified a lot of things in my head, and it had got really out of control, and by shutting down that power, I took my own power back. It really taught me the value of putting my energy into the right things, that I was a very decent and moral person. I was just in the totally wrong environment. And it made me very streetwise. The main thing is I got out of there unscathed, and I'd never do it again, unless, of course, there was maybe free Maccas.